The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Is Ontario's auto sector about to turn green? News that the province's first electric vehicle battery plant will be built in Windsor was hailed as the breakthrough the industry needs. Tonight, we'll assess the prospects for it to kickstart a major transition in manufacturing and consumer preferences. Then, if you think you've got only 5 senses, author and zoologist Jackie Higgins will set us straight thanks to what some remarkable animals reveal about humans. It's Wednesday, March 30th, and that's next on The Agenda. Billions invested in Ontario's auto sector is always great news for jobs in the economy. This time, with the massive investment announced last week in Windsor to manufacture batteries for electric vehicles, it could be even better news for the environment. With us now on the prospects for this to prompt a major shift towards green automobiles in the province, we welcome, in the nation's capital, Joanna Kyriazis, Clean Transportation Program Manager at Clean Energy Canada and co-chair of the Canadian Battery Task Force. In Drumbo, Ontario, southeast of Waterloo region, Greg Mordew, ArcelorMittal Chair in Advanced Manufacturing Policy and Associate Professor of Engineering at McMaster University. And in Hamilton, Ontario, Brendan Sweeney, Managing Director at the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. And we're delighted to have the three of you on our program tonight to check in some very significant developments in the auto sector. And let me just set up our conversation with this. Sheldon, if you wouldn't mind, bring this graphic up and we'll do a bit of background here. With the support of the federal, provincial and municipal governments, LG Energy Solution and the automaker Stellantis are joining forces to build the province's first large-scale electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant. The joint venture will invest more than $5 billion to build a facility in Windsor to manufacture batteries for EVs in Canada. That represents the largest automotive manufacturing investment in the history of the province. The battery facility will employ an estimated 2,500 people and should be operational by the year 2025. Let's get into this. Brendan, how much of a game changer is this?
It's a game changer. It's a big one. We'd been expecting an announcement like this for some time, and were pleasantly surprised when we heard the number, $5 billion. It's a greenfield investment, so it's a brand new plant, so that's exciting. It brings a new stakeholder, a new partner in LG into Canada and into Ontario. Again, the magnitude is just great. It outstrips the next biggest investment that we know of and that was General Motors, 1986, by about $500 million. And it gets us that battery plant. It gets us that first battery plant, which could very well serve as a catalyst for further investment and further prosperity in Ontario.
I don't know if you were intending to be punish here or punny, but when you did say magnitude, I mean, Magna's piggybacking on this too, right?
Yeah, that is as of this morning. Magna, a new sibling plant to their big Formet plant in St. Thomas, new plant going into Chatham, and they're going to be stamping battery enclosures for the Ford F-150 program, which is a huge program. Really exciting. Magna's our largest manufacturer in Ontario and in Canada. And this is the first new Magna plant of this size that they've announced since, I think, 2007. So the good news keeps piling up. So really excited to be involved in this at this point in time.
Very good. Joanna, how do you see it?
I mean, I think the Stellantis and LG Energy battery plant is really a home run for Canada's auto sector and for the Canadian economy writ large. We have been talking about Canada's world-leading battery supply chain potential for a while now, but we've really struggled to turn that potential into reality until the last few weeks. So landing Canada's first battery gigafactory, it not only puts Canada on the EV battery map, it also really sets us up to play a key role in electrifying the North American auto industry.
Well, since you've used the baseball analogy, Greg, let me pursue it. There are solo home runs when you're losing 7-2, and then there are grand slams when you're down by 3 in the bottom of the ninth. Which one's this?
Well, I think this is a grand slam when you're down at the end of the ninth, because there were any number of reasons for this not to land in Canada. Our labor costs are high, our electricity costs are high, and frankly, nobody ever gets fired for making an investment in the location of the big market. And Canada is not the big market. The US is the big market. So kudos to all those involved in the investment attraction process in Windsor and Ontario and the government of Canada for landing this big one and hitting this major home run.
Can you just pursue that a little bit? Because yes, there are lots of players all over the world who wanted this, and we got it. How did we manage to make an argument that clearly, apparently, was superior to all the rest?
Well, I was very surprised. I mean, some of the investment attraction processes that the government of Canada employed and the city of Windsor employed were really outside of what is the norm. And they were telegraphing this and talking about it and talking about these companies for quite some time. And frankly, the rule of investment attraction, as far as my experience tells me, is that the rule is you don't talk about investment attraction. It's like the Fight Club. And they've been talking about this for quite some time. And despite that, Stellantis and LG looked at everything and went ahead and moved forward with it. So I think it's a really positive, as everyone else has said, it's a really positive move forward.
I got to say, all three of you are really on your games today in terms of analogy use. I'm really impressed. This is good. Joanna, pick up the story if you would, because apparently just because we build EVs in this province doesn't mean that Ontarians are flocking to buy them. And in fact, the stats I have seen say we're a little bit behind other jurisdictions when it comes to actually putting our dollars where our feet on the pedal go. If that's not a terrible metaphor, I don't know what is. Anyway, why have we been slow to pick up on the EV purchasing route?
Absolutely. Well, I think Doug Ford's vision for EVs in the province, it's sort of missing half the equation, right? Which is actually helping Ontarians drive electric vehicles. So just because we're building them, that's not necessarily going to translate into higher levels of EV uptake in the province. And it's not going to translate into emission reductions in our, one of our most polluting sectors, the transportation sector, unless and until the Ford government does more to support Ontario drivers to go electric.
And what would that look like in your view?
Well, let's take a look at leading provinces in Canada, BC and Quebec. Right now, we're really seeing a tale of two Canadas when it comes to EVs. In BC and Quebec, 1 in 10 every new cars is electric. You can access provincial rebates to stack on top of the federal one. There's support to install home charging stations, and automakers are required by law to sell more EVs in those provinces. It's no wonder 80% of Canada's EV sales happen in those two provinces, and automakers send all their EV inventory over there. Ontario, on the other hand, is seeing only 3% of new car sales being electric. That is lower than the national average. It's even lower than the Yukon on a per capita basis. It's because we don't have any of these policies in place. And it's also meaning that Ontario drivers are finding it impossible to find an EV to buy. So I think we've got to look to some of those leading provinces and move forward with some similar policies if we really want to unlock the cost saving and emission reduction benefits that these vehicles provide.
Brendan, let me get you back in here because Joanna has accurately laid out the situation as it exists today. But it's actually worse if you go back a few years, and I'll just put a few things on the record here. When Doug Ford became premier in 2018, he ended the cap-and-trade system. He ripped out all the charging stations that the previous government had begun to build. He took away all the subsidies for purchasing green cars. That was the EV rebate program. And now he is sort of portraying himself as, the greenest premier around and the guy who's led a revolution of EV in the province of Ontario. There's an old expression, you can't suck and blow at the same time. Do you think they're doing that?
Well, when it comes to some of the consumer incentives, I think they're a zero-sum way to get a few cars on the road today. They don't address the actual problems about the supply, the low supply of EVs in North America. They also don't actually address the problem that EVs cost a lot today. The best way to address this is to invest in manufacturing, to help manufacturers achieve scale and achieve profitability so we can bring the price of EVs down over the long term. I'd also, like to point out that these consumer incentives, whether they're federal, whether in British Columbia, whether they're in Quebec, they're all going to imported vehicles. And so I think there's no denying that they can help get a few vehicles on the road in the short term. In the longer term, investing in manufacturing, investing in Ontario manufacturing in order to help companies achieve scale, help companies achieve profitability, is the longer term solution to consumer adoption, among other things.
Greg, can I get your take on that? How do you portray yourself as the greenest guy going, given the history of what they did 3.5 years ago?
Well, I think there's a lot. I think we can throw a lot of blame around, but the reality is that Canadians and Ontarians are not buying electric vehicles because Ontarians and Canadians buy vehicles that are in a $35,000 or $40,000 price range, and the vehicles that the manufacturers are offering right now are at the top end of that. They're $55,000, they're $65,000, they're $80,000, and people look at that and say, "I'm not quite ready yet. I'll wait a little bit, and until the industry rounds itself out so that it meets what's happening." And Joanna can talk to this a little bit more. What's happening in Southeast Asia, what's happening in Europe, where there are more lower cost vehicles, electric vehicles that are available. We're not buying electric vehicles because the electric vehicles that are available and are on offer right now in Canada are not what the market really wants right now, or consumers really want right now.
Okay, I take your point on that, but Joanna, let me hammer this point home one more time on the political end of things, because you raised it in the first place. And that is, we're about to go into an election campaign here in the province of Ontario where the Premier is going to be crowing about what a great environmental/EV record he has. Sales up, infrastructure up, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of conveniently ignores what he did for the previous 3 years that he was in power. You're in the environmental movement. How does it look from where you're sitting?
Yeah, I think the fact that Ford has been so reluctant to bring these EV rebates back is not only bad news for Ontario drivers who are missing out on the fuel cost savings that EVs provide, particularly when we're seeing these sky-high gas prices right now. But they're also sending the reluctance is also sending the wrong message to auto and battery makers who are looking to set up shop in the province. I think we need to be focusing on building a domestic market to ensure that there are buyers for the products that those companies are going to be selling and help to justify further investments. Just to go back to Brendan's point, I agree we need to be investing in manufacturing, looking to reach economies of scale, but I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and. We need to focus on the demand side and help consumers afford electric vehicles while they're still seeing higher sticker prices than comparable gas models, which is expected to change in just a few years. As well as supporting manufacturing.
All right, let me pick up on another angle of this story, and that is great news that this plant is coming to southwestern Ontario. 2,500 new jobs. They're going to be good paying jobs, no doubt. Brendan, my question is, one of our problems in Ontario today is people without jobs and jobs without people. Do we have enough people, high-skilled, well-educated, well-trained, who could fill all 2,500 of those jobs?
We do. We have probably almost enough. There will be, we will rely to some extent on immigration to help staff this particular facility and others, and that's a good thing, I think. Do we have enough people? I think we do. We just have to kind of get them engaged with the industry, get them engaged with these companies, make sure that they know about these opportunities. And I think on the other hand, too, LG, Stellantis, other manufacturers generally, probably have some work to do to engage those persons, especially persons in their 20s, persons in their 30s, women, new Canadians, groups that manufacturers have historically had a hard time engaging. I think that's the $5.2 billion question, how they're going to staff it up. And I think They're going to have to be a bit innovative. They're going to have to do something a bit different. And we are really excited to learn about what that is going to be. Staffing up a plant with 2,500 people. Staffing up a plant with 25 people these days is tough. 2,500, it's going to require something new and innovative. And they'll have to do it in a way, too, that doesn't suck from other parts of the labor market in Windsor, which is bounded by water on two sides and the United States on another.
Well, this is it. Greg, can you answer the $5.2 billion question? Can we do this? Do we have enough people here?
Yeah, Brendan's right. We've got lots of people here, but do they want to work in manufacturing in general? And do they want to work in automotive manufacturing in particular? The last time, 10 or 15 years ago when this was done, it was relatively simple. We had a different formula and structure for automotive employment in Canada, and automotive employers, and particularly automotive employers at the original equipment manufacturers, were the alpha employers. They paid more. They had defined pension plans. They had very strong benefit plans. And since then, in order to be competitive with the U.S. South, and more specifically with Mexico, they started to tear away some of those attributes that made them the alpha employer. They have long grow-in periods. The benefits are ratcheted back until they grow in. The pay is lower in the early phases than it was previously. The defined benefit pension plans have given way to defined contribution plans, and so Canada no longer, or the automotive manufacturers in Canada are no longer the alpha employers, and they've got to move in different directions and look to different labor markets and sectors or sections of the labor market that they didn't look at 10 years ago, and that's what LG and Stellantis will be doing as they move forward.
Right, Joanna. Let me take the story in this direction here. I guess part of what you'd like to do if you're planning an economy is to be able to sort of corner every angle of a particular sector. You know, in the case of EVs, in the batteries, we're talking about mining the batteries, making the batteries, figuring out some way when they're finished how to recycle the batteries. Are we closer to sort of controlling all ends of this sector now with the announcement in Windsor?
Well, battery cell manufacturing, it's often referred to as an anchor investment. And I think that's because it can really support development of the upstream parts of the battery supply chain as well as the downstream parts. So, I expect, for instance, this Stellantis battery plant to stimulate some further projects in the upstream mining and refining portion of the supply chain. It helps to de-risk those projects because it's offering a clear downstream buyer for the battery metals and minerals. And then, of course, it'll also be feeding into EV assembly and potentially some battery recycling activities in Canada as well. Ontario is home to one of North America's leaders when it comes to battery recycling life cycle. It's of course impossible to predict what sort of joint ventures or partnerships will form, but I certainly think that landing this gigafactory increases our chances of attracting further investment and seeing further development across the entire battery supply chain.
I got a follow-up for you, Joanna, but first it just occurred to me that, we're using this expression Stellantis all the time, and there are going to be people who perhaps have never heard of Stellantis before. So let me just put on the record here. These are the folks who do Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroën, Dodge, Fiat, Jeep, Maserati's in their stable, Opel, Peugeot, Vauxhall. They represent a lot of brands that people will be aware of, even if they don't understand Stellantis by name. But okay, having said that, EVs have got a lot of attention, rightly so, for the fact that they don't burn gas, or many of them don't burn gas, and therefore they're better for the environment in that way. We have also, though, read stories which suggest that we don't really know how to recycle the batteries properly yet, and if you look at the whole life cycle of a battery, we may not be any further ahead when it comes to environmental protection. Can you weigh in on that?
Sure. So Certainly, battery electric vehicles on a life cycle basis come out way ahead on emissions compared to gas cars. There are a number of studies showing that. But in terms of how green or clean an EV or battery is, it really depends on where in the world we are manufacturing them. So Canada holds a huge trump card compared to the rest of the West when it comes to the battery supply chain. We've got an abundance of clean electricity to power manufacturing operations. That means that EVs and batteries produced in Canada, or Ontario in particular, have a much lower carbon footprint than those that are produced in a place like Kentucky, for instance. If you combine that clean electricity advantage with our battery recycling capabilities, Canada's really positioned to produce some of the cleanest batteries in the world. And that's one of many reasons why we want to be seeing Canada and Ontario attract more of these global investments.
Greg, do you agree with that?
Well, that's a nice story. And the Canadian automotive industry is full of nice narratives about clean batteries. But at the end of the day, LG, Stellantis, everybody needs to respond to the requirements of their shareholders. And if they can build a marketing plan on the basis of where their batteries come from and the electricity that's used in the form of electricity that's used, they'll do it. Frankly, I don't think that they're particularly interested in that. They're interested in satisfying their shareholders and their stakeholders in more direct manners than that.
Joanna, you apparently have not yet made the sale with Greg that EV batteries are as pristine for the environment when you consider the whole life cycle of the thing, as you suggested in your first answer. You want to go back at him?
Sure. Well, I'll just counter that. I think a growing number of stakeholders and investors are looking for reduction of carbon emissions across the products that these companies are selling, and companies like Tesla or BMW or British Volt or Northvolt, they are making public commitments to reduce carbon emissions across their operations, and they're going to be held accountable to external stakeholders and investors, against those targets. So I noted that every single investment we've seen in the past few weeks, General Motors, BASF, and the Stellantis, LG Energy, all mentioned Quebec or Ontario's clean electricity as a big draw.
Brendan, you want to break the tie here?
Oh, I kind of agree with both Greg and Joanna.
That was very diplomatic of you.
I think, though, I'd really like to point out that the life cycle of a battery is going to be a long time, because the materials in that battery are going to be so valuable in 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 years to go back into a new battery. And just like we've seen the price of scrap steel spike at certain points because we use it to make more steel, I think we'll see this with batteries. And so their batteries are not going to end up in landfills. Batteries are going to end up back at battery plants being turned into new batteries. And I think that's something that a number of companies are already planning for and are already out ahead of. And we've even seen Stelco start to make a play into this. Again, that they're probably 5-6 years off actually kind of building up this facility, I think, in Nanticoke. But batteries are not going to end their life in a landfill. They're going to end their life in another car. Start their life again, I guess.
Right. Well, that's you anticipated my next question, because Joanna, I did want to go back to you at that. If we're getting into this, whole hog into this EV business, but these huge batteries are going to end up in landfills as opposed to appropriately recycled, we're not going to be that much further ahead, presumably. Are you here tonight to assure people that these batteries are not going to end up in landfills and that there is a better solution out there for them?
I agree with Brendan. I'm not worried that these batteries are going to end up in landfills. We are expecting to see battery material supply crunches globally in the near future. So this is incredibly valuable material. It takes a long time to get a new mine online and to start feeding into the battery supply chain. And so I do think that we'll be relying on recycling batteries at the end of their lives and recovering a lot of that high value material to put it back into the supply chain.
Okay, we've talked about, Greg, the battery plant in southwestern Ontario that is going to be up by 2025. We're also hearing the potential of Stellantis building an assembly plant in Brampton. Have you got any details you can fill us in with that?
Well, I don't have any details. I thought that perhaps when they made the announcement in Windsor last Wednesday that they might talk about what the long-term future for Brampton is, but they didn't, and there's still opportunities to do so. But I think there's some really interesting things that are happening in the automotive industry outside of the EV, because remember, we're at, as Joanna and Brendan have said, we're somewhere between 5 and 10% proliferation of electric vehicles, which means we're somewhere between 90 and 95% proliferation of internal combustion engines. So it's going to take a long time, or quite a number of years and a couple of model cycles to get through to this EV promised land. And in the meantime, we've got tens of thousands of people that make internal combustion engines in vehicles that are made or that end up, like in Alliston, for example, a couple of weeks ago. That announcement in Alliston was huge for the assembly plant there.
This is the Honda plant.
And it's big, the Honda plant. That's a big announcement, because they consistently make 390,000 or 400,000 vehicles a year with about 4,000 people there. Those jobs are steady and consistent, and for them to re-up in Alliston was important. And not just because we've all come to expect in Canada that the Toyotas and Hondas will continue to invest, but Honda has had a history over the last little while of shutting plants down. They've shut a plant down in Turkey last year. They shut a plant down in the UK that they'd had in operation for 35 or 40 years. So the Honda plant and all of these internal combustion engine investments are still very important. They will eventually transition to EVs, but to shut down a plant and then move to EV production the next day takes a while. And the market has to be there. And right now, the market is not quite there yet. So so it's a difficult chore to balance the industry as it has evolved and to plan for the future. And I think that the province and the feds and Windsor, as evidenced through Windsor, have done a fairly adequate job managing that process.
Brenda, I want to follow up with you on this, and you're going to forgive my unparliamentary language here, but I want to get your sense of the fact that the EV battery plant went to Windsor because the federal government put $500 million in subsidies into it. The province did hundreds of millions of subsidies. If you want to take the Alliston Honda example from last week or the week before, once again, we're talking about huge dollars, I think $1.6 billion of federal and provincial subsidies that went into this thing. The question is, do we have to bribe people to come here?
I see these as investments. I don't see them as bribes. I see these as investments. If we're going to be involved in a global industry or a continental industry that involves Mexico and $2 an hour jobs, these investments are necessary by our governments, and the economic benefits associated with the jobs at an assembly plant or at a battery plant alone are just massive. When you add on to that the spin-off benefits, what we call the multiplier benefits, in terms of tax revenues, in terms of consumer spending, in terms of the secure and engaging nature of some of this work, those investments, while they seem, the sticker price looks really big, they pay off really, really quickly in terms of taxes and other monies flowing through our economy. And, frankly, obviously we'd much rather see these jobs in Windsor or in Alliston or anywhere else in Ontario than in a country known for racket unions and paying people $1.50, $2 an hour.
No, I totally get that. But Joanna, we taxpayers are subsidizing each job to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars per job. Are you convinced that this is the right way to go in order to keep these plants here, these jobs here, et cetera?
I really don't see a way around it, to be honest. You know, it's an incredibly competitive global market, and governments around the world are just really aggressively going after these auto sector and battery sector investments. When you've got the EU putting big money on the table, when you've even got the US, you know, the land of the free market, putting $6 billion of its recent infrastructure bill into the battery supply chain, and then Biden's proposing another $50 billion to support the auto sector in transitioning to electric. I don't know how else Canada can compete. We've got a lot of natural advantages to offer, but you know, if other jurisdictions are putting big money on the table, I think we've got to put some on the table as well.
Got to pay to play, eh? Got to pay to play. All right, in our last few minutes here, Joanna, pick up on this angle if you would. I think it's been pointed out a few times. We've got about 5 to 10% penetration of EVs in the Ontario market so far. I guess climate change has been one of the single most important arguments used by people as suggesting why they should get rid of their gas guzzler, particularly if gas is so high in price, and move to an electric vehicle. That's not the only appeal. That's not the only argument. Joanna, give us another argument you'd make besides climate change as to why people ought to consider EVs.
There are loads of benefits of going electric. So I think cost savings is a big one. EVs are much cheaper to fuel. To charge an average electric vehicle at home in Ontario, it'll cost you about $10 from empty to full. Second, EVs are actually very convenient. You get to skip the trip to the gas station altogether. The vast majority of your charging will happen at home overnight. So, you know, just like you plug in your phone overnight, you can just plug in your car and wake up to a fully charged vehicle. And then EVs are also a lot of fun to drive. Many of the new models that are coming to market are offering, you know, features that we haven't seen before. One example is the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the electric version of Canada's favorite pickup truck. It's going to have the ability to power campsites, work sites, and even your entire home. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to going electric.
In the interest of full disclosure, I should say I have driven the same Chevy Volt for the last 10 years. It is both a battery-powered car with an internal combustion engine, so there is no, as they say, range anxiety. I used to spend $80 a week on gas. Now I spend $10 a week on electricity, and it's quiet. It's a very quiet, beautiful car. Anyway, I put that on the record. We got about a minute and change left here. Brendan, come on in here and tell me one thing you'd like to see the Ontario government do that it currently is not doing to encourage more EV use.
Fill the assembly plants up.
That was quick.
Get to scale.
Okay.
Get to scale. Get the price down. People will buy them.
Greg, last word to you.
Keep the checkbook open.
A blank check, or what do you want on that check?
Well, we've spent about $600 or $600 since 2000 for every vehicle made in Canada. We're going to need to keep the checkbook open if we expect to continue to make vehicles in Canada. So that is our calling card. That is our advantage, and that's the one that we need to deploy.
Gotcha. I want to thank the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your wisdom with us. On the top of the screen, Brendan Sweeney, Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. And down there on the bottom left, Greg Mordew, ArcelorMittal, DeFasco Chair in Advanced Manufacturing Policy, McMaster University as well. And Joanna Kiriazis, Clean Transportation Program Manager at Clean Energy Canada. She's the co-chair of the Canadian Battery Task Force. There we go. Thanks, you three. Humans sometimes conveniently overlook the fact that we're part of the animal kingdom. But we might be more inclined to acknowledge that given the incredible lessons contained in a new book by zoologist and filmmaker Jackie Higgins. It's called Sentient: How Animals Illuminate the Wonder of Our Human Senses. And it brings Jackie Higgins to our virtual studio from London, UK to explain. Jackie, it's great to meet you. How are you doing tonight?
Very well, and thanks for having me on, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
A delight to have you here. Let's start with a quote from the book, and then we'll come back with a question here. Here's from your book. This is early on. The sensorium that we parrot from nursery, sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste, was set out over 2 millennia ago in 350 BCE by Aristotle in De Anima, on the Soul. His concept of 5 senses persisted through Shakespeare's 5 Wits, and to this day remains a near universal belief expressed across cultures, not only in everyday conversation, but also in scientific literature. However, modern science has proved Aristotle wrong. Okay, before we take on Aristotle, let's just start with what you start with at the very beginning of the book, which is whether there is or isn't a scientific consensus on what constitutes a sense. What do you think?
Surprisingly not. I mean, it depends. It's a deceptively simple question. And should we define a sense according to how information from the world reaches us? So through the number of sensory receptors we have. If we define a sense like that, then sight is at least 2 different senses. Taste is at least 5, because we have senses for salt and sweet and sugar and bitter and umami. And then smell, there are thousands of different sensory receptors. So then you might ask, do we define it according to a sensory experience? But that too is really difficult to tease apart. I mean, some people might argue that it's folly even to try and split out the different senses, because perception is ultimately a multi-sensory experience. It's like a tapestry woven together of all these different senses. So it's a trickier question than you might think, more philosophical than scientific, perhaps.
Indeed. So why do you suppose this Aristotelian version of things has persisted so strongly for so long?
A good question. It's delightful in its simplicity, and it's something we can grasp readily. So we see, we smell, we hear, we touch, we taste. What we don't realize is that our eyes do support more than one way of seeing. Our skin supports more than one way of touching or feeling. And then there were also senses that Aristotle didn't identify because they work beneath his conscious awareness. So our senses of balance or proprioception, our sense of body. Our eye senses space, but it also senses time. So scientists are finding all sorts of new have found all sorts of new senses since Aristotle. And I like to think, I feel a little bit of a fraud to say he was wrong. I think he would have been delighted to understand the field of science today and would have thrilled in all these new discoveries.
Well, if I've read correctly in your book, you've got it up to around 22. Do you think science agrees that it's around 22 senses in total?
Well, because no one's defined what a sense is, it's mercurial. So a conservative scientist might say 10. Accepted, I would say, it's in the 20s, 21, 22. And some radical scientists say there's as many as 33 different senses served by dedicated receptors.
Well, you chronicle 13 different animals in the book and what we pick up and learn from each. But I mean, given the realities of time here, we're not going to go through all 13, but let's do one each from land, sea, and water, and then you can tell us what these animals reveal about our senses, and beyond that, you can make fun of the host, because I hadn't heard of half of these, I think. But let's start with one that I have heard of, and in fact is on the cover of your book, and that's the cheetah. You talk about a cheetah named Sarah, who can sprint faster than Usain Bolt, which is pretty fast, and speed isn't even her top strength. How is that possible?
So actually, their top strength is balance. They are, when they're chasing a gazelle, you've got to remember that a gazelle turns on its heel and turns on a sixpence. And so the cheetah has got to remain on that gazelle's heels. And so it does that by turning at breakneck speeds through massive accelerations, massive decelerations, and it keeps its head incredibly steady. If you ever watch those beautiful slow-mo images caught by National Geographic, for example, of cheetahs running, their head is stock still. It's their body that's moving like chaos beneath them. But their eyes are set on that cheetah. They're like a gazelle-seeking missile. So what the cheetah has is an incredible sense of balance. And a scientist called Camille Garohe looked at its balance organs. Inside its and our skull, inside our skull are our balance organs. Basically, they're in a little area the size of a little pea, and inside there you've got the cochlea, how we hear, but also you've got balance organs, our otolith canals and semicircular canals. And Grohe looked at the cheetahs to discover that it has the largest sensory vestibular system of any cat. And in particular, it's got these very enlarged vertical canals, semicircular canals. And that's replicated in us and that happened in our evolution when we started to walk. So paleoanthropologists have looked at our ancient ancestors, fossils, and they discovered that Homo erectus was the first species to have elongated vertical canals, because walking, you may think it's easy, but it's one of the most daring balancing acts in the animal kingdom. Each step we take is a step into the unknown.
Fabulous. I have to say, we're going to get off the path for a second here, for me to say, I have never in my life heard of the expression turns on a sixpence. That is fabulous. I think we'd say over here, turns on a dime and leaves a nickel change, but I get what you meant. That was fabulous.
I like that.
Let's, okay, back on the path here. And here is picture number 2 of another animal that you talk about. And again, never heard of this, a spookfish, which uses a strategy that is similar to how the U.S. Navy would camouflage bomber aircraft in World War II. Okay, what does that mean?
So this spookfish, this particular spookfish was, in fact, I concentrated on another spookfish, which is the four-eyed spookfish, to talk about our sense of dark. But there are some deep-sea spookfish that create bioluminescence on their bellies. And this means that when you've got a predator looking upwards, the light will camouflage it against the down light from the sunshine. And so they won't be able to see that creature swimming above. But that particular spookfish is a slightly different story, also wonderful. If you've noticed, it's transparent at the top to let as many photons into those eyes as possible.
That is astonishing. Wow. Okay. Next one. A bar-tailed godwit. And again, I'm going to bet that most of the people watching or listening to this have never heard of a bar-tailed godwit, but somehow these creatures can fly for 8 straight days, covering nearly a quarter of the world's distance. How do her senses allow for such a journey?
So this was an incredible story, and this bird E7 cracked all Guinness Book of Records to do this trip. It's the longest non-stop hop, longest migration known, continual migration. And they use various senses, but the sense that I was particularly interested in is sense of direction. Because if you can imagine, they're flying from Alaska down to New Zealand, mainly over ocean, so there aren't very many landmarks to keep an eye out. And sometimes it's dark, every night it's dark, and sometimes the cloud hides the moon and the stars, so they can't rely on celestial maps for navigation. And so scientists know that these birds use a magnetic sense. They're able to sense the magnetic field. It's a compass sense, and that enables them to basically get from A to B and not get lost. And this is the only chapter in my book where, first of all, the sense organs haven't definitely been found. Lots of interesting research has been happening with these birds. Birds definitely do use magnetoreception, but what is unproven still is whether humans can also use magnetoreception and also have a sense of direction. And one scientist at Caltech is convinced that we do have this sense, and he's done some really interesting scientific experiments with tantalizing evidence suggesting that we might.
Well, you've talked humans, so let's go there next. And I want to pick up the story with a blind Turkish artist that you talk about, Esref Armagan, who apparently can see through his fingertips. Now, he clearly has a disability that he has accommodated himself to, and I think we need to understand how he sees through his fingertips. Go ahead.
So this is something he always said. He essentially said, because I'm feeling with my fingers, my fingers have erased my blindness. He's congenitally blind since birth. And he went to Harvard a few years ago, and his brain was scanned while he was feeling objects and then drawing them. And the scientist who was working on the data, one of the scientists, Alvaro Pascual Leon, he said to me that essentially when they looked at his brain, if you didn't know what was going on and who was inside the scanner, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this man is seeing something. Because what was happening is Eshref was using the part of our brain, which round the back of our head here, where our visual information is processed. It's called our visual cortex. And Eshref's visual cortex was activated when he was feeling and when he was drawing. So one could say he does see through his fingers. He's not got workable eyes, but the visual part of his brain is working. So it's back to that question you asked me at the beginning, how do we define a sense? If we define it according to what part of the brain is processing the information, he sees.
Well, this is very evocative of another animal that you described called the star-nosed mole, which apparently uses 22 tentacles around its bright pink nose to feel its way around. Do you see the comparisons there? Well, obviously you do. You've put it in the book, but how fabulous is that?
So that little creature uses touch to navigate its underground burrows. Its eyes are next to no good. And so it sees, like Eshref, it sees the world through touch.
How does that creature stay alive if it can barely see?
So it's got the most incredible sense of touch. So this extraordinary sense essentially enables it to catch prey. In fact, one wonderful discovery was that Ken Catania, who studied these moles, found that they can identify, capture, and gobble up a piece of worm far quicker than a cheetah can catch its prey. So it ended up in the Guinness Book of Records as the fastest predator.
Isn't that incredible? Wow. Okay, so let's bring it to today, and we do need to talk about the impact that COVID has had on all of the things that we've talked about here, because some of the scientists that you feature are trying to figure out how the pandemic has affected our capacity to smell, to taste, to touch, etc. What have they discovered so far?
Well, so I've spoken to them since, and I haven't done a huge amount of research into what specific they're discovering it so far, at the moment, what's going on. But we do know, I can tell you from my own personal experience when I caught COVID last year, as I was writing the chapter on taste, that suddenly my food tasted like kind of unappetizing dough. Chocolate, which I love, tasted sweet, only sweet and mushy. Coffee, which I also love, just tasted bitter. And so it reminded me of something that the scientists have been telling me, which is this idea that flavor is majority smell. And I hadn't lost my sense of taste. I had lost my sense of smell, and with my sense of smell, I'd lost the ability to sense flavor. So that was fascinating. And this is something that pervades our thinking throughout. I mean, Proust talked about dipping his Madeleine in a tisane and talked about he elided the sense of taste with memories, but really he was eliding the lack of the smells, the aromas, that when he bit on that Madeleine, little molecules would travel up the back of his throat and then he would to his nose, and then he'd be able to smell it through retronasal olfaction. So smell and food are really important. One scientist, neuroscientist, Rachel Hertz, talks about the deep connection of smell to emotion. And she even says, I smell, therefore I feel, with a nod to a certain French philosopher. So when we lost our sense of smell during COVID, we lost a lot of emotion. Food just lost its appeal, but there was a lot of emotion lost through that as well. And touch was another sense that was self-imposed. We a loss of touch because we had to isolate, and we, children were kept home from school and not playing with their peers, or we weren't able to see our grandparents or our parents. And one of the scientists in my chapter on the vampire bat, in which I look into touch and an aspect of touch that people don't often think of. You think of touching the world like the star-nosed mole and being able to see, grasp its topography. But there is a whole aspect to touch, which is the emotion of touch. And new sensors are being found in our skin as we speak, really, or being unraveled in our skin. And they found a sensor that enables us to detect a caress. Now, the scientist, Francis McGlone, who I spoke to, said that we're only beginning to understand this aspect of touch. And he thinks that it is the Higgs boson of the social brain, that touch is so fundamentally important that he is worried about the lack of touch that we experienced during COVID. We know that touch makes us feel happy and it releases endorphins and oxytocin. And it basically triggers a reward system. And if those reward systems aren't triggered, people tend to look for other ways to trigger them, drink and drugs or other things. And so he talks of touch not as a sentimental indulgence, but as a biological necessity. And perhaps this sense, which before I started researching the book, I thought of as quite pedestrian, in fact is perhaps the sense that makes us the most human.
Fascinating. I suspect we both know lots of people who lost their senses of smell and taste during COVID, and it has not come back for them. How about in your case? Has it all come back?
Thankfully, it has come back. I'm very glad. After about six weeks, 2 months, it came back. Coffee tastes good again.
Does it make you, though, for those for whom it has not yet come back, is their understanding of what it is to be human, to be a sentient human, do you think that changes going forward?
So if something doesn't come, what I did learn with this book is that if something doesn't come back, our brain doesn't lie fallow. It's incredibly neuroplastic, and it adapts and shifts and changes according to the sensory information you are getting. So there will be other ways, perhaps, people are experiencing the world and drawing different aspects. In the very first chapter, I talk about our sense of color, and there is a comment made, in fact, by Oliver Sacks of a man he traveled with on a trip to the island of the colorblind. And this man couldn't see any color, but he took the most beautiful black and white pictures. Well, Sacks wondered whether color could blind us to much of what the world has to offer, because this man was able to see incredible tonal variety or textural variety. His eyes saw the world like an Ansel Adams photograph. So I think when we lose something, we hopefully will gain something else.
Well, that leads me to my next question, which is, had you thought through the implications of your own sense of smell or taste not coming back, and what other senses of yours might have therefore been heightened to compensate for that?
I would have been very sad to have lost my sense of smell. I don't know what might have filled in the gap, but perhaps touch. So smell has a very emotional impact on us, and so does touch. So maybe one would come to rely more on touch. I mean, what's interesting with all these senses, and as we understand them and the importance and what they do for us, is I begin to get quite skeptical of things like the metaverse. I mean, we do need these, we do gain a lot from these senses. I'm not quite answering your question. I don't know what would replace my loss of smell.
No, it's an indication
I feel for those who have.
Right, it's an indication for you of how significant this was for you, that you kind of can't imagine life without it.
Yes. And I think that it underscored, I took the sense for granted until I lost it. And that's a theme that runs throughout the book as well.
What a wonderful lesson that is. Well, let's finish up on this. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who would like to begin to practice a life more centered with a sense of wonder? And surely in your book you give us so many examples of things to be absolutely astonished by, but perhaps we don't really know where to start. What would we do?
I think it's about slowing down and noticing things, noticing the smell of coffee in the morning, wondering how your brain processes this concoction of different aromas. We're such marvels, but we're running around the whole time, racing around, not noticing. And I think if we give ourselves a moment quietly to sit down and question how it is that we are like we are, then the wonder begins to open up and we begin to unpick ourselves and realize how extraordinary we are. The introduction ended on a note from Oliver Sacks in his last op-ed. He talked of knowing it was the last op-ed. he was going to write. He'd just been given a diagnosis of terminal cancer, but he talked of the adventure and the privilege he'd had being on this planet as a sentient creature, as a thinking animal. And that instilled in him this immense sense of gratitude. And those words were resonated deeply with me. And I had them above my computer all the time, thinking, because what I really want for this book to do, or for someone to do having read this book, is to feel the gratitude, because we are extraordinary. And just being sentient in itself is an adventure and a privilege.
Well, I can tell you, we have been extremely grateful to have had you on this program to talk about Sentient, how animals illuminate the wonder of our human senses. Jackie Higgins, it's great to meet you. We wish you much success with the book, and we thank you for joining us on TVO tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. I've enjoyed our conversation.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. Tomorrow, we'll consider why Brampton, Ontario says it needs a new hospital to go with a new medical school that's headed its way. We'll find out why. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. We'll see you again tomorrow. And just before we go, a reminder that right after this program, you can catch the latest edition of The Thread with Nam Kiwanuka. She's looking into the future of work. Have a look.
Hi, I'm Nam Kiwanuka, the host of TVO's The Thread. This month, from remote work to pandemic pay, we're talking about reimagining work in Ontario. We'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation on Instagram at TVO The Thread. And check out our next episode tonight at 9 p.m. or stream it on tvo.org, the Thread YouTube channel, and other TVO streaming channels to hear what Ontarians have to say.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.